Okay, picture this, Lydia. A single mom balancing work, her daughter, and, well, life in general gets a text that changes everything. Suddenly, long buried family tensions start surfacing, and she's caught in the middle. It's one of those moments where you think, wait, what is even happening? But hey, before we jump into all that drama, I'm curious, where are you watching from? And how's your day going? Let's see how this story unfolds. It was a typical busy Tuesday for Lydia. She was in the middle of a client meeting, juggling notes and checking out a new venue, when her phone buzzed. Seeing her mother's name on the screen made her pause. Calls from Rachel were always a mix of excitement and tension, never predictable. This time, though, there was something different in her voice, bright, almost bubbly, the kind Lydia remembered from holidays or when truly good news was on the horizon. "Lydia, darling," her mother began, and Lydia instinctively leaned against the cool brick wall, bracing herself, half expecting a critique or a backhanded compliment disguised as concern. But then Rachel's words caught her off guard. She wanted to host a special family celebration for her father's birthday, a proper garden party. She even suggested Lydia and her daughter Lily arrive early for a private pre-party with just the core family. Lydia blinked, skepticism first taking hold. Dad quiet, simple tastes, happy with a small dinner and a book. A grand party, really? It seemed almost out of character, and yet she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Could it be that this time her mother was truly including them, seeing them as part of the inner circle rather than the afterthoughts of family events? Lydia listened as her mother described the plan, her words spinning through her mind. The phrase core family was heavy with meaning, layered with years of subtle exclusion. For so long, Mark and his perfect little family had been the centerpiece, the golden standard, while Lydia and Lily had lingered on the edges, often feeling invisible in their own home. And yet, she wanted to believe. She wanted to see this as a genuine gesture, a chance to be recognized, if only for a short while. Over the next few days, that hope began to grow. Lydia and Lily dove into the preparations together. They went shopping for a new dress for Lily, something bright, cheerful, a little sunshine captured in fabric. Lily twirled in front of the mirror, blonde hair catching the light, eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Do you like it, Mommy?" she asked, the kind of excitement that only a child can hold, pure and unguarded. Lydia's heart swelled with warmth. The thought of her daughter feeling loved and included, making all the doubts and old tensions seem distant. They talked endlessly about the party, the games, seeing cousins, celebrating grandpa, and Lydia found herself laughing along, caught up in Lily's joy. The contrast between her daughter's innocence and the subtle, complicated history of family dynamics weighed on her mind, though she tried not to let it touch the moment. Lydia's instincts as an event planner also kicked in. She considered offering help with arrangements, wanting to ensure the day was seamless for everyone. But her mother waved her off gently. "Don't worry about a thing, dear. Susan is helping me." Susan, her sister-in-law, always hovering, always somehow controlling the narrative, the unspoken enforcer of family traditions. Lydia knew better than to push. She quietly backed off, storing skepticism like a small shield, while keeping her eyes on the bigger goal, making this day magical for Lily, no matter what. Finally, the day arrived. The sun shone brightly, a perfect canvas for a garden celebration. Lily, practically vibrating with excitement, donned her new dress and twirled once more, hair catching the sun. "Do I look okay, Mommy?" she asked, wide-eyed. "Absolutely beautiful." "Sweetie," Lydia said, smoothing down a stray strand of hair. The drive to her parents' house was filled with Lily's chatter, what cupcakes she hoped to eat, what games she would play with cousins. Lydia smiled, feeling a calm she hadn't felt in years. Perhaps, just perhaps, this would be different. They pulled into the driveway right at 2 o'clock, and Lydia caught her breath. The front yard was immaculate, flowers blooming in perfect harmony along the walkway. A large white tent stood in the backyard, a hint of the grand celebration ahead. Lydia smoothed down Lily's dress one last time and took a deep breath. This was their hour, a chance to step into the space of the so-called core family, if only for a little while. The anticipation was tangible, a delicate mix of excitement, nerves, and the faint tension that always came with family gatherings. And as they approached the front door, Lydia held Lily's hand a little tighter, ready for what she hoped would be a day full of warmth, laughter, and the rare feeling of inclusion. For a few fleeting moments, Lydia allowed herself to hope, imagining a celebration where her daughter could be seen and cherished, where she could finally feel that, in this family, they mattered too. Lydia and Lily pulled into the driveway right on time, 2 o'clock sharp, just like her mother had requested. The front yard immediately struck. Lydia manicured lawns, blooming flowers lining the walk, and the massive white tent set up in the backyard. She could hear the faint murmur of people moving about, probably catering staff, preparing the space for what was sure to be a grand event. It was more elaborate than she had expected for a birthday that she assumed would be a simple, intimate affair. She glanced at Lily, who was practically bouncing in her seat, eyes wide with excitement. The little yellow dress, the new shoes, her hair catching the sun, it all seemed to shine with anticipation. "Are we early? Mommy, is Grandpa here yet?" Lily asked, her voice bubbling with genuine joy. Lydia smiled, feeling the warmth of that excitement, but a small knot of tension tightened in her chest. Not all that glitters was gold, she reminded herself. They had been invited early, yes, but past experiences had taught her that appearances could be deceiving. Taking a deep breath, Lydia opened the car door and helped Lily out. Smoothing down the dress one last time, the air smelled faintly of flowers and freshly cut grass, a serene contrast to the nervous churn in her stomach. They walked up to the front door, the weight of history pressing lightly on Lydia's shoulders. For years, she had been on the periphery, watching as her brother and his children were treated as the centerpiece of family gatherings. She had learned to navigate the subtle slights, the little microaggressions, the constant comparisons that left her feeling inadequate, invisible, or somehow secondary. But today, she tried to push that aside. She wanted to give Lily a chance to simply enjoy the day without the undercurrents that had complicated every other family event. Before she could even ring the bell, the door swung open. Her mother, dressed in a floral hostess gown, greeted them with a bright, almost too loud smile. "Lydia, Lily, you're here, come in. Come in." Rachel's cheer seemed practiced, but Lydia forced herself to believe in it. As they stepped into the foyer, However, Lydia's gaze fell on a small table near the entryway. On it lay a sack of name tags and a marker. Her mother picked one up with brisk efficiency and handed it to Lily. Lydia looked down at it, and her heart sank. Neatly written in her mother's perfect cursive was Lily's name, but underneath, in smaller, stark letters, were the words, "Limited guest." The words hit Lydia like a slap. Limited guest. The sting of exclusion was immediate, sharp, and visceral. She felt a jolt of protective fury, her chest tightening as she looked down at her innocent daughter holding that tiny card. Lily's brow furrowed, confusion spreading across her face. "Mommy, what does limited mean?" she asked softly, her voice trembling just slightly. Lydia's mind raced. She wanted to shield her daughter from this cruelty, to explain it away, to protect that bright, trusting heart from the sting she was suddenly feeling so acutely herself. "Oh, it's just for the caterers, sweetie," her mother interjected quickly, with a dismissive wave of her hand. "So they know who's who. Don't worry about it." The casualness of the explanation only made it worse. Lydia knew, from years of experience in event planning, that name tags for staff might indicate seating, dietary restrictions, or roles. But labeling a family member, especially a child, as limited was cruel, calculated, and unnecessary. Her stomach knotted as she forced a smile for Lily's sake. "It's just a silly tag, sweetie. Let's put it on your dress and then we'll go find Grandpa," she said softly, bending down to attach the pin, though every movement felt monumental. The stark white rectangle stood out against the bright yellow fabric like a target, a visual reminder that her daughter was somehow set apart, marked as other. They moved further into the house, the living room arranged for the party. Extra chairs, small tables, decorations, the works. Her father was nowhere in sight, and through the large glass doors leading to the patio, Lydia could see Mark and his family gathered near the dessert table, laughing, sampling pastries, enjoying the beginning of the celebration. They were clearly the core family, the ones already participating in the joy of the day. And she and Lily, despite the promise of an early car special hour, were being positioned on the outside. Susan spotted them first. Her smile was tight, carefully measured, almost predatory in its perfection. She walked over, eyes flicking immediately to the name tag on Lily's dress. A flicker of satisfaction, or was it triumph, crossed her face before it was masked by politeness. "Hi, Aunt Susan," Lily said, trying to embrace the festive spirit, oblivious to the deeper meaning behind the words on her tag. Mark turned, his half-eaten pastry in hand, and offered a brief, one-armed hug. "Hey, Lydia. Hey, Lilybug," he said, tone neutral, the warmth lacking. The children, Jake and Chloe, were older now, at that awkward preteen stage where subtle cruelty often masquerades as humor. Their eyes flicked to Lily's name tag, exchanged a glance, and stifled a snicker. The air seemed to thicken with unspoken judgment. The sunny day outside did nothing to soften the chill of exclusion that wrapped around Lydia and Lily. Lydia's protective instincts surged. She felt a tremor of anger rise in her chest, but she controlled her voice, careful not to escalate the situation further for Lily's sake. "Why don't we grab a little treat for Grandpa?" "Sweetie," she said, trying to steer Lily towards something joyful, some small anchor in the day that had already taken a sharp turn. Her mother busied herself with directing the catering staff. meticulously avoiding Lydia's gaze, as if the unpleasantness could be erased by ignoring it. Lydia clenched her jaw. Every motion of Rachel and Susan reinforced the cruel little narrative the name tag had introduced. Lily, still trying to participate, reached for a chocolate-dipped strawberry. Susan's voice stopped her mid-step. Ah, ah, ah. Let's just wait a moment, shall we? We need to make sure there's enough for the real guests. Lydia froze, a cold knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Real guests. The implication was immediate and unmistakable. Her daughter's hand dropped, face falling, the light in her eyes dimming just slightly. Lily looked back at her, seeking reassurance, and Lydia's heart ached. She pulled her daughter close, whispering, "It's okay, sweetie. We'll wait. Let's just enjoy this for now." But the words felt thin, insufficient against the raw sting of exclusion. The early signs were everywhere: whispered comments, stiff smiles, laughter that cut too sharply, subtle positioning that made it clear they weren't part of the inner circle today. Not truly. Lydia felt a familiar burn of old wounds reopening, layered with a new intensity, the humiliation of her child being treated as secondary in her own grandfather's home. She kept her voice gentle, her hands firm around Lily's shoulders, a protective shield, guiding her away from the dessert table for now. Lydia's mind raced, cataloging every subtle interaction, every glance, every smirk. She could see the pattern, the carefully orchestrated hierarchy, the cruel little signals that indicated this wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. The shock, the confusion, the sting of betrayal, they all hit at once. But her focus was singular: protect Lily, maintain a semblance of calm, and navigate this day without breaking the fragile innocence her daughter clung to. And as they stepped back, creating a small bubble of safety around Lily, Lydia couldn't help but notice the way her own heart felt like it had been punched, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and an almost dizzying sadness. The promise of inclusion, the early hope that had sparked during the phone call, had already collided with the harsh reality of the family dynamics she had hoped, maybe foolishly, to escape, if only for a few precious minutes. Lydia stood near the edge of the room, clutching Lily's hand lightly, trying to make sense of the scene before her. At first, she tried to tell herself it was all a misunderstanding, that maybe she was reading too much into subtle gestures. But then she noticed the way Susan moved, the way her sister-in-law's eyes lingered just a bit too long on Lily's name tag, a slight smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Lydia's stomach tightened as she realized that this wasn't accidental. This was deliberate. Mark, her brother, leaned casually against the dessert table, chewing on a half-eaten pastry, his eyes flicking over to them and back without any warmth in them. Lydia felt a surge of frustration. He gave the appearance of normalcy, a casual, unbothered demeanor, but the subtle cues, his body language, the small shift in his posture, the glance toward Susan told her a different story. This was all coordinated, a silent acknowledgement that they were not meant to be included in the joy that was unfolding around them. She watched as Jake and Chloe, her nephew and niece, older now, caught sight of Lily's name tag. They exchanged a quick glance and a barely stifled snicker. Chloe leaned toward Jake, whispering something that made him laugh, just enough to be noticeable. It wasn't loud, but it was loud enough for Lydia to see the small, cruel triangle forming two kids, subtly instructed by the environment, reinforcing the sense that Lily was somehow lesser, outside, not part of the main celebration. Lydia felt her chest tighten, the protective instincts flaring. Her daughter, innocent and unsuspecting, was being marked, labeled, and mocked, and it stung Lydia deeper than she expected. She tried to intervene lightly at first. "Lily, maybe we should grab a small treat," she suggested, trying to guide her daughter away from the dessert table. But the words from Susan stopped her daughter mid-step. "Ah, ah, ah," Susan said, smooth and measured, a shadow of authority in her voice now. "Let's just wait a moment, shall we? We need to make sure there's enough for the real guests." Lydia's heart sank. Real guests. The implication was clear, and it cut sharper than she could have anticipated. Lily looked up at her with wide, questioning eyes, and Lydia's heart ached. She knelt down, keeping her voice soft. "It's okay, sweetie. Let's wait a little. We'll find something else to do." But even as she spoke, the tension in the air seemed to thicken, a suffocating reminder of where they stood in the family hierarchy. Lydia's eyes scanned the room, taking in every interaction. The laughter from Mark and his family wasn't casual. It was performative, orchestrated, a reinforcement of the division. Susan's attention flitted from task to task, always ensuring that their positioning was reinforced, that Lily's presence was acknowledged only minimally, and then deliberately marginalized. Each glance, each whisper, each measured gesture confirmed a pattern Lydia had suspected for years, but had hoped wasn't this blatant. This was strategy, not accident. The children continued to whisper and giggle. Chloe, in particular, made a small motion with her hand, a mimic of Susan's dismissive wave from earlier, and Jake let out a quiet, sardonic laugh. The cruelty was subtle, yet cutting. Lydia's protective instincts flared so sharply that she had to take a deep breath to steady herself. She felt the rage bubbling up, the anger that had lain dormant during so many family gatherings, surfacing with intensity she hadn't experienced before. It was not just the small exclusions and subtle comments of the past. This was her daughter, her child, standing right there, being treated as secondary, being deliberately made to feel less. She watched Mark approach the dessert table again, this time addressing them in a lowered tone. "Don't take it personally," he whispered, as if he were giving a benign explanation. Lydia's eyebrows shot up. "Don't take it personally." Her mind raced. What is going on, she thought, but his casual, almost conspiratorial tone only reinforced her growing suspicion. He was complicit, participating in a deliberate structure of exclusion. The whispers, the gestures, the deliberate actions, everything pointed to a plan, a coordinated effort to reinforce their position outside the inner circle. Susan now drifted back to the table, her focus returning to decorations, pastries, and the minutiae of the event, carefully avoiding eye contact with Lydia. She wanted to maintain a facade of normalcy, but the tension was palpable. It was a silent war, executed in the details, the controlled laughter, the subtle positioning, the unspoken rules made explicit through glance and gestures. Lydia's mind analyzed everything with the precision she had honed as an event planner. This was not accidental. She realized It was carefully calculated, designed to make her and Lily understand their place, to assert a hierarchy without a single harsh word spoken directly to them. Her fury mixed with disbelief. How could they be so petty, so deliberate, so cruel, and yet so calm in their performance? The name tag, the whispers, the performance, all of it pointed to a careful orchestration of exclusion. She felt the familiar heat of anger rising, but forced herself to remain composed, at least outwardly. Lily's innocence was the priority. She needed to protect her from the full brunt of the cruelty while gathering the evidence of its intent. The murmurs of the other guests, the casual chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the distant sounds of laughter formed a backdrop to Lydia's intense focus. Every movement, every interaction became a signal she could decode. Susan, passing Lily's tag to the caterer, Mark subtly guiding the flow of conversation away from them. The children's laughter, all these details reinforced the conclusion she was forming. This was a deliberate act. It was not a mistake, a lapse, or an innocent oversight. This was a display, a structured social exclusion, executed to demonstrate the hierarchy of the family and to reinforce their perceived positions. Lydia's mind raced through memories of past gatherings, connecting dots she had previously ignored or rationalized. The subtle undercurrents, the small slights, the ways she had always been made to feel secondary, now made sense in a clearer, sharper light. It was all part of the pattern, part of the structure that had finally been revealed so openly and so brazenly. She could feel the weight of years of subtle psychological maneuvering, now crystallized in the moment before her eyes. And it wasn't just about her, it was about Lily, her daughter, pure and untainted by the family politics, was now a participant in the hierarchy, marked by a card, labeled as lesser. Her excitement tempered by subtle signals of exclusion. She watched, analyzing, learning, cataloging each gesture and word. The protective instinct in her surged higher. Every whisper, every glance, every small snicker from the children reinforced the stakes. Lydia felt a wave of fury, but it was tempered by her understanding, by her awareness. She needed to remain calm, to remain in control, to protect Lily while she absorbed the calculated cruelty unfolding before her. She couldn't confront it openly yet. The priority was shielding her daughter, understanding the depth of the exclusion, and confirming that this was indeed intentional. And with each passing moment, each small, cruel interaction, Lydia's internal analysis became clearer. This was a carefully orchestrated, deliberate act, meant to assert dominance, to reinforce a social hierarchy, and to demonstrate to her, and most painfully to Lily, who belonged at the center and who was on the outside. Lydia's mind raced as she stood quietly in the corner of the room, her professional instincts kicking in. Years of orchestrating events, large, small, simple, extravagant, had trained her to notice every detail, every small inconsistency, and every unspoken intention. She realized she needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't just a family misunderstanding. Something deeper, colder, and more deliberate was at play. So she began her investigation, systematically and quietly, like she would any event she planned herself. Her first stop was the catering. She approached a woman organizing the trays, clipboard in hand. Lydia put on a warm, friendly smile. The kind she used to put clients at ease and ask casually, "Excuse me, everything looks amazing. I'm just curious about the menu you've prepared." The woman, Maria, smiled back, explaining the spread in detail: carving stations, seafood bars, hot entrees, multiple salads, and a full dessert table. Lydia nodded along, her mind calculating, assessing the scale and quality of the catering. This was not a budget-conscious affair. Not at all. The cost per head was substantial, far beyond the thin excuse her brother had whispered earlier about being limited due to a catering budget. She asked the catering manager a few more questions about guest count, menus, and planning logistics, all the while keeping her tone casual, non-threatening. Each answer confirmed what Lydia already suspected: they weren't excluding them out of financial necessity. The numbers didn't add up. The only plausible explanation was something far more intentional, something personal. The exclusion was strategic, calculated, and cruel. The name tag was not a mistake. It was part of a deliberate plan to mark Lily and herself as lesser outsiders, not to be served, not to be included fully in the celebration. Next, Lydia moved to the bar, noticing the bartenders arranging top-shelf liquor and meticulously polishing glasses. Again, everything was professional, carefully arranged, and clearly part of a high-end plan. Lydia observed, calculating costs and logistics. The scale of the operation confirmed her analysis. This wasn't about money. It was about status, control, hierarchy. The guests at this event were carefully selected, and she and Lily had been consciously designated as marginal, set apart with a label. The realization made her stomach churn. She felt disbelief, shock, and anger, all in equal measure. Her final stop was the cake. She had seen it earlier, tucked in the kitchen, a large multi-tiered masterpiece, golden icing celebrating her father's 70th birthday. It was expensive, ornate, a professional bakery job meant to impress us and celebrate. Again, the details confirmed the event's lavishness. And again, the exclusion of herself and Lily was starkly incongruent with the justification she had been given. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. Lydia's thoughts began to piece together a bigger picture. She imagined the planning meetings her mother had held with Mark and Susan, the emails exchanged, the whispered decisions, the laughter at the expense of her daughter. Every small gesture she had observed in the living room. The timing, the placement, the comments fit into a meticulously crafted scheme to enforce a hierarchy that positioned her and Lily outside the true family circle. Her professional curiosity now merged with a personal outrage, sharpening her mind, focusing her attention. She needed to see the master plan. If there was one, it would reveal the full extent of the cruelty. She glanced toward her mother's office, a small room just off the kitchen. The door was slightly ajar. Lydia stepped inside quietly, heart pounding, aware of the quiet hum of the party outside. The office was empty. Her mother had always been meticulous, keeping binders for every event, every plan organized down to the last detail. On the desk lay a pristine white binder with her mother's elegant script on the cover. Dad's 71st birthday bash. Lydia's pulse quickened. This was it. This would reveal everything. She opened the binder carefully, flipping through contracts, receipts, and event orders, and then she found the guest list, printed neatly, alphabetically. It included 80 names. Everyone expected to attend the party had been accounted for, organized meticulously. And at the very bottom, separated from the rest, were 2 more names, written in by hand, Lydia and Lily. Next to their names, in small but deliberate handwriting, was a note. Limited guests. No meal charge. Seat at small table by the kitchen entrance if space needed. The air seemed to still in that moment. Lydia felt the full impact of the cold, calculated exclusion. It was not a lapse in judgment. It was an intentional, premeditated act to signal to them, visibly and painfully, that they were not considered full participants in the family celebration. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned the pages, and then she saw the email chain between her mother, Mark, and Susan. Messages laid out in stark black and white, confirming the cruel plan. Each line, each word, underscored the intention. They had discussed how to maintain a united front to ensure Lydia understood that her choices had consequences. To deny food to her child, to label her as a limited guest, had been decided in advance. Susan had questioned if it was too harsh. Mark had insisted it was practical. Her mother had agreed. The words jumped off the page, crystalline in their cruelty, yet calm, procedural, professional in tone. It was surreal. To see this kind of meticulous planning applied to emotional exclusion, to punishment, was almost incomprehensible. Lydia closed the binder briefly, letting the shock settle. She couldn't deny it anymore. The evidence was overwhelming. The exclusion, the whispers, the carefully constructed gestures, it all formed a deliberate pattern, designed to communicate a hierarchy, to enforce a message of inferiority. The name tag, the whispered explanations, the way Susan had positioned herself at the table. Mark's casual comments, they all fell into place now. She felt a mix of disbelief, rage, and a chilling clarity. Her professional mind, honed over years of planning events, now analyzed the scenario as a catastrophic, mismanaged event orchestrated with precise cruelty. Her thoughts raced. How had they thought they could hide it? How had they believed labeling a child, marking her as a limited guest, and orchestrating subtle cues could go unnoticed by a trained eye? Each element, the catering, the bar, the cake, the seating was accounted for, the event executed flawlessly in its grandeur. And yet, beneath that surface, the malicious intent had been meticulously embedded. Lydia realized the elegance of the setup only highlighted the cold precision of the exclusion. Nothing about this was random. Every detail reinforced the message: you are not part of the inner circle. You and your daughter are secondary, lesser. As she stood there, breathing slowly, a plan began to form in her mind. The clarity of purpose was almost intoxicating. Her personal hurt, her maternal outrage, was now channeled through the lens of her professional skill. If the event had been carefully orchestrated to humiliate, to mark them as lesser, then the tools of her trade could also dismantle it. She could neutralize the cruelty, expose it, and reclaim control. But first, she had to understand it fully, and she had done that. The binder, the emails, the guest list they provided, not just proof, but insight into the deliberate nature of the exclusion. Every detail now told a story. Each email confirmed intent. Each notation reinforced premeditation. Lydia's disbelief slowly shifted to a focused, analytical mindset. The emotional shock was still there, a simmering undercurrent, but it no longer clouded her judgment. She saw the structure, the calculations, and the plan for what it was. The limited guest status, the positioning by the kitchen, the whispered explanations about the budget, they were all strategic maneuvers. This was a statement of power, an attempt to control, to assert a hierarchy, and to reinforce a lesson in the cruelest way possible on a 10-year-old child. Lydia exhaled, steadying herself. She knew the next steps would require calm precision, but for now, she allowed herself a moment to take it all in, to understand the full scope of the betrayal and the careful architecture of the exclusion. She could feel her anger simmer, but beneath it, a cold clarity formed. She wasn't just a mother witnessing cruelty. She was an event professional, analyzing every element, seeing the master plan unfold in real time, understanding the motives, the logistics, the intentions behind every action. It was a sobering revelation, but also empowering in a strange way. She now held the knowledge, the evidence, and the understanding necessary to respond effectively, to protect her daughter, and to reclaim the narrative of the day. Step by step, she processed the realization this was deliberate. This was personal. And now, she was ready to act. Lydia stood in the quiet corner of the living room, watching Lily engrossed in her favorite game on the tablet. Her daughter's small, concentrated movements, the way her fingers danced over the screen, gave Lydia a moment of calm she desperately needed. She leaned down, brushing a loose strand of hair from Lily's face, and whispered, "Hey, sweetie, how about we get some ice cream later?" "Just you and me." Lily's eyes lit up immediately. "Really, can we get the kind with sprinkles?" she asked. Voice full of excitement, Lydia smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "Of course. Any flavor you want, but first, Mommy has a very important phone call to make. It'll just take a minute." Stepping onto the front porch, phone in hand, Lydia felt a familiar clarity settle over her. Years of orchestrating events, large and small, had trained her to stay calm under pressure, to assess logistics, and to execute complex plans with precision. And now, she was turning that same skill set inward, using it to reclaim control from a situation that had been designed to humiliate her and Lily. She dialed David Chen from Prestige Catering, a man she knew well, someone she trusted implicitly. Her voice was warm, professional, and steady. "David, it's Lydia. I'm at an event your team is working right now, a birthday party for Mr. Phillips. There's been an unexpected family emergency. The guest of honor is being taken to the hospital, and we need to cancel the entire event immediately." She let the words hang for a moment, just enough to convey urgency without panic. "Cancel, Lydia." "My team is already on site," David said, his voice catching with surprise. "I know, David, and I understand this is highly unusual," Lydia replied, tone calm, measured. "I will personally guarantee full payment. You won't be out of pocket, but I need you to instruct your team to pack everything up and leave within the next 30 minutes. David's voice softened, concern evident. "Of course. Lydia, family comes first. I'll call the on-site manager immediately. We'll start packing right away." Lydia ended the call, a sense of quiet satisfaction washing over her. Phase 1 was complete the food, the centerpiece of their carefully orchestrated humiliation, would soon be gone. No confrontation, no drama, just precise, effective action. Next, she dialed Elite Bar Services, repeating the story a sudden family emergency, the guest of honor being taken to the hospital, and her personal guarantee to cover any costs. The bartenders were instructed to pack up and leave within 30 minutes. And again, Lydia felt the surge of professional control flowing through her. Each step was methodical, executed with precision, dismantling the party without a word of argument or spectacle. Finally, Lydia called Monique at Sweet Art Bakery. She had spotted the massive, multi-tiered cake earlier, tucked in the kitchen, a golden masterpiece marking her father's 70th birthday. Her tone was calm, warm, and diplomatic. Monique. It's Lydia. I'm calling with unfortunate news. A family emergency means the event needs to be canceled. The guest of honor has been taken ill. I would like to donate the cake to the children's wing at the city hospital. I'll cover all costs for transport and delivery. There was a pause on the other end. Then, a warm voice. Oh, what a wonderful idea. Lydia, of course. I'll have someone pick it up immediately. Lydia confirmed the arrangements, ensuring that the cake, a key element of the party's intended display of hierarchy and control, would now be repurposed for good. It was a subtle, elegant reversal of the intended humiliation. She hung up the phone and exhaled, feeling the quiet power of her actions settle around her like a protective shield. Returning to Lily, Lydia knelt down beside her, softening her expression. Okay, sweetie, it's time for our treat, ice cream. You pick the flavor. Lily's face lit up, and the excitement in her voice made Lydia's heart swell. Strawberry with rainbow sprinkles, she exclaimed. Perfect, Lydia replied, smiling, guiding her toward the door. Each step, each action was measured. She was reclaiming the narrative of the day, turning what had been a carefully constructed act of cruelty into something joyful and free. As they drove toward the ice cream parlor, Lydia reflected on the surreal control she now wielded. The food, the bar, the cake, everything that had been leveraged as instruments of exclusion and hierarchy had been neutralized, removed from the equation entirely. She didn't need to argue with her mother, her brother, or Susan. No one was aware of her moves, and yet the impact would be immediate and undeniable. The anticipation of the outing, the sunlight streaming through the car window, the small hand in hers, all provided a grounding contrast to the calculated malice she had just disarmed. Lydia allowed herself a quiet smile of satisfaction. Control didn't need to be loud. Sometimes the most effective power lay in precision, calm, and professional authority. Pulling into the brightly colored ice cream parlor, Lydia helped Lily out, marveling at the simplicity and joy around her. Children laughed, parents chatted, waffle cones and chocolate scents filled the air. For a moment, the complex, cruel web of the party outside seemed distant. They stepped inside, Lily darting toward the counter to select her favorite flavor, eyes shining, laughter bubbling from her small frame. Lydia watched her daughter, feeling a rare sense of peace. She had neutralized the orchestrated humiliation without raising her voice, without creating a scene, without anger overtaking strategy. Every phone call, every decision had been executed with intent, purpose, and a clear focus on protecting her child. Ice cream wasn't just a reward for patience, it was a reclamation of joy, a subtle yet undeniable statement that she would not allow cruelty to dictate their day. Sitting in the booth, Lydia watched Lily savor each bite, meticulous with the sprinkles, a soft giggle escaping now and then. The simple, bright joy of the moment was a stark contrast to the complex, calculated exclusion they had just experienced. Lydia took a slow bite of her own mint chocolate chip, savoring not just the flavor but the quiet triumph of her actions. The event that had been designed to assert hierarchy, to mark them as lesser, had been quietly dismantled. Lydia's professional skill had merged seamlessly with her maternal instinct, protecting Lily while asserting control in the most effective way possible. In those moments, Lydia allowed herself a quiet reflection, the power of calm, deliberate action, of strategy executed with precision, had given her more than control over a day. It had given her autonomy, agency, and the ability to shield her daughter from malice while still enforcing her own boundaries. She had turned instruments of humiliation into tools of justice, without confrontation, without spectacle, and without losing sight of what mattered most. As they left the parlor, the sun low in the sky, Lydia felt the tension ease from her shoulders. Lily, sticky fingers and all, chattered about sprinkles, chocolate, and dreams of the next sweet adventure. Lydia squeezed her hand, thinking of the contrast between this simple joy and the orchestrated cruelty of the party. It was a stark, tangible reminder that control, when applied thoughtfully and strategically, could transform a day designed for humiliation into one of protection, joy, and quiet triumph. The drive home was calm, the world outside seeming ordinary, unremarkable, but Lydia's mind was sharp, cataloging the events, planning for what might come next. The party outside, the whispers, the name tags, the subtle hierarchy each had been neutralized, dismantled with precision, and the satisfaction was quiet but profound. She glanced at Lily again, smiling softly. "We did it, sweetie. We're okay." Lily, unaware of the full scale of the morning's drama, smiled back. And for Lydia, that was everything. Control, strategy, protection, and love all had converged. And in that convergence, Lydia found a small, powerful victory, executed without a single raised voice, a single dramatic gesture, or a confrontation. After leaving the ice cream parlor, Lydia kept a close eye on her phone, though she didn't rush to answer. Within minutes, notifications started flooding in texts, missed calls, all from her mother, Mark, and Susan. Her mother's messages were frantic, demanding explanations about the caterers packing up and the bartenders leaving. Mark's text followed, sharp and incredulous, accusing her of going too far, and Susan's words were venomous, calling her selfish, vindictive, and cruel. Lydia glanced at Lily, who was happily focusing on her ice cream, and reminded herself that this was about protecting her daughter. She ignored the barrage, letting it all pile up, a quiet wall between them and their toxic drama. The silence they maintained for a few minutes felt like a shield. Lily's small, sticky hands held the spoon tightly, eyes wide with delight as she meticulously ate her sprinkles. Watching her, Lydia felt a calm resolve settle over her. Every call, every angry message was just noise. The point had been made, and she had done what needed to be done. Protect Lily. Dismantle the event and reclaim control. The power of her professional skills combined with maternal instinct had turned the tables completely. And now she would not let anyone steal this moment of peace for her daughter. Later that evening, After ensuring Lily was tucked in bed and calm, Lydia turned her attention back to the messages. There were over 20 missed calls and a flurry of texts, each one dripping with frustration, confusion, and entitlement. But she didn't respond impulsively. Instead, she reviewed each message, noting the tone, the blame shifting, and the desperate attempts to maintain control. Finally, there was an email from her father. Its subject line was simple and direct. He had learned what had happened and expressed genuine regret. He admitted he hadn't known about the exclusion and recognized that Lydia and Lily were the most important guests in his life. Reading that brought a soft exhale of relief. At least someone in the family understood the truth and shared her moral clarity. The confrontation came the next day. Lydia was at home when she noticed the car pull up outside. Her mother, Mark, and Susan arrived unannounced, faces haggard and expressions tense. Lydia took a deep breath, steadying herself. Before opening the door, arms crossed, she stood firm, her posture radiating calm authority. The first words came from her mother, voice cracking with feigned indignation. How could she humiliate them like that? But Lydia's eyes, steady and unflinching, met theirs directly. "Humiliate you, really?" she asked, voice controlled, firm but calm. "I think you have it backwards. You humiliated my daughter. You deliberately planned to treat her like a second-class guest at her own grandfather's birthday party. What I did was simply respond to that." Susan tried to interject, claiming it was a misunderstanding, a logistical mistake blown out of proportion. Lydia held up a hand, shaking her head slightly. "Was it a misunderstanding, Susan? The email where you, Mom, and Mark discussed maintaining a united front, teaching me that my choices have consequences, and ensured my daughter wouldn't be served the same meal as everyone else. That was a misunderstanding." Silence fell over them. Lydia's calm authority filled the room, leaving no space for excuses. Mark's face faltered, guilt flashing briefly before he lowered his gaze. Susan's mouth opened and closed, words failing to form a credible defense. The evidence was undeniable, and they knew it. Lydia didn't need to raise her voice or pace the room. Her moral clarity, the steady assurance in her tone, and the visible documentation of their intentions left them exposed. Every attempt at denial collapsed under the weight of truth. "You didn't want a daughter or a sister," Lydia continued, voice softening slightly but still firm. "You wanted a subordinate, someone who would fit into the neat little box you designed. When I didn't, you decided to punish me. And worse, you decided to punish my child. You used her to get to me. That ends here." Her mother's eyes welled with tears. She stammered, barely forming sentences. Mark and Susan were visibly ashamed, caught in the quiet power of Lydia's unflinching confrontation. Lydia allowed herself a small, controlled pause, letting her words sink in, observing the weight of the revelation pressing on them. She wasn't angry in a chaotic way. She was resolute, calm, and measured, standing firmly in her truth and the protection of her daughter. "Until you can look me in the eye and give a genuine, honest apology, not for the party being ruined, but for the behavior that led to it, we have nothing more to say to each other," she said, clearly drawing the line. "Stay away from me and my daughter. You've shown who you are, and we will not participate in it." With that, she closed the door, leaned against it for a moment, heart racing but mind clear. The confrontation was over. The toxic ties were severed. The long chapter of seeking their approval, hoping for recognition and inclusion, was closed. Lydia felt a profound sense of release, a mixture of relief, resolve, and quiet triumph. The emotional burden of years of subtle cruelty had been met with calm, precise action, and now, for the first time, she was free from their influence. In the days following, the angry calls and texts ceased, replaced by a wall of silence. The absence of contact felt strange, almost surreal. There was an ache where the relationship had been, but there was also a new sense of freedom. Lydia and Lily were no longer at the mercy of their family's calculated cruelty. The first breach in that silence came from her father, who reached out to suggest dinner at a neutral location. He wanted to rebuild the relationship with them, separate from the toxicity that had governed the previous gatherings. Lydia agreed, recognizing the importance of fostering a genuine connection without subjecting Lily to harm or hierarchy. The dinner with her father was peaceful, quiet, and full of warmth. He acknowledged the wrongs that had occurred, expressing regret for not intervening sooner and vowing to prioritize the relationship with Lydia and Lily moving forward. Lily, perceptive in her own innocent way, responded with simple kindness, hugging her grandfather and accepting his gestures of love. The contrast to the previous day's calculated exclusion was stark, and Lydia felt a sense of closure, a realization that family could exist on different terms, guided by respect, kindness, and care. Reflecting on the confrontation and its aftermath, Lydia understood the power of calm authority, moral clarity, and strategic action. She had navigated the toxic environment without succumbing to anger or drama, protecting her daughter while holding others accountable. The act of standing firm, exposing the truth, and drawing clear boundaries provided both emotional release and empowerment. The experience reinforced the lesson that confrontation didn't always require loud arguments. Sometimes, the strength lay in measured, deliberate action coupled with unwavering moral clarity. Lydia's calm, assertive response not only safeguarded Lily but also reclaimed her own agency, turning a situation designed to win into an opportunity for clarity, control, and eventual closure. The weeks and months following the party felt like stepping into a new rhythm for Lydia and Lily, one that was entirely their own. There was a quiet stillness in the aftermath of the chaos, a strange but welcome peace that came from cutting the toxic ties that had long bound them. Lydia had never fully realized how much the constant tension with her mother, Mark, and Susan had pervaded even ordinary family interactions. Now, with the storm of texts, calls, and emails finally quieted, she could focus on what truly mattered: her daughter and the people who genuinely cared for them. Her father became a central figure in this new chapter. Unlike the rest of the family, he had shown himself capable of kindness, honesty, and reflection. A few days after the events of the party, he reached out to suggest dinner at a neutral spot, a quiet Italian restaurant that both Lydia and Lily loved. Lydia agreed, appreciating the gesture and sensing his genuine desire to repair the relationship. When they arrived, she noticed a shift in his demeanor. He was older, a little wearier, but there was a warmth in his presence that contrasted sharply with the manipulations of the previous party. He knelt to hug Lily, his voice thick with emotion as he apologized for the treatment she had received. "I am so sorry, sweet pea," he said, holding her close. "You are the most important guest in the world to me." Lily, innocent and unaffected by the complexities, simply hugged him back. The simplicity of the gesture highlighting the contrast between authentic love and the performative cruelty of her other family members. Over the next few weeks, visits with her father became a cherished ritual. He called often, arranging small outings, park visits, and quiet dinners at home, making a conscious effort to include Lydia and Lily in meaningful ways. These moments allowed Lydia to rebuild trust and deepen the connection, separate from the toxicity that had previously dictated family interactions. She saw that family was not just about obligation or blood ties. It was about respect, care, and consistent presence. Slowly, she began to redefine what it meant to have family, understanding that it was less about fulfilling societal expectations and more about nurturing genuine relationships that honored her and Lily's worth. Meanwhile, Lydia and Lily created new traditions of their own. They spent evenings baking cookies, watching classic holiday movies, and enjoying quiet, simple moments by the fireplace. These rituals weren't dictated by anyone else's expectations. They were entirely their own, built on love, joy, and shared experiences rather than hierarchy or judgment. The holidays, which had previously been fraught with tension, became times of genuine connection, of creating memories untainted by manipulation or exclusion. Lydia found herself marveling at how much lighter the air felt without the subtle pressures of the toxic family dynamic hovering over every celebration. Through these months, Lydia noticed her own growth. She realized how much strength she had gained from standing firm during the events of her father's birthday. She had protected her daughter, asserted boundaries, and navigated a highly charged situation without succumbing to the chaos. Each act of calm authority reinforced her confidence and self-respect. She began to understand the real power of saying no, of drawing lines, and of protecting her child without apology or guilt. The lessons of that day had shifted her perspective, teaching her that the most meaningful boundaries were the ones drawn to safeguard her values, her peace, and her family's well-being. Lydia also reflected on the dynamics with her mother, Mark, and Susan. She realized that she no longer needed their approval or validation to feel whole. Their attempts to manipulate and exclude had been a cruel form of control, and she had finally seen it for what it was. By stepping away from the toxic expectations, she reclaimed not only her agency, but also the narrative of her life and her daughter's life. She understood that rejecting toxic behavior didn't require anger or confrontation. It required clarity, firmness, and the willingness to prioritize what truly mattered. In doing so, she discovered a new kind of freedom, one that allowed her to fully embrace the relationships and traditions that were healthy, authentic, and affirming. One of the most profound shifts was Lydia's evolving definition of family. She began to see it as more than a set of obligatory connections or social appearances. Family became the people who showed up consistently, with respect, empathy, and care. It was her father, whose presence was steady and unconditional. It was Lily, whose laughter and joy became the center of her world. It was the quiet rituals they built together, the small but meaningful moments that fostered love and connection without the need for validation from others. Lydia realized that the family she wanted and needed was not necessarily the one society told her to prioritize. It was the one she actively chose to nurture. As the months went on, Lydia continued to cultivate this understanding. She created clear boundaries for herself and her daughter, shielding them from the manipulations and petty cruelties of the others. The toxic family members had attempted to assert control through exclusion, hierarchy, and subtle emotional manipulation. But Lydia had learned that she could choose not to participate in that drama. Her own boundaries became a form of empowerment, a way to preserve dignity and self-respect while fostering an environment of safety and warmth for Lily. Every time she said no to unreasonable demands or declined participation in harmful gatherings, she reinforced the lesson that her family's emotional well-being came first. The holidays became a test of these new principles. When her mother suggested a Christmas Eve dinner, Lydia considered the invitation carefully. She asked her father if there had been any genuine apologies, and when he confirmed there had not, she made the choice to stay home with Lily. They baked cookies, watched holiday movies, and drank hot chocolate by the fire. When her father visited for a few hours, bringing gifts and warmth without any pretense, the day became genuinely joyful. Lydia recognized that she didn't need grand parties, complicated logistics, or the approval of those who had previously tried to control her. Simple, intentional moments with people who truly cared were far more meaningful. Over time, Lydia observed the transformation in herself and in her daughter. Lily thrived in the absence of toxic influences, her innocence and joy intact, growing stronger and more confident each day. Lydia, in turn, felt a quiet but powerful shift in her own sense of self. The years of seeking approval, navigating subtle exclusions, and managing emotional manipulation had given way to a grounded, self-assured presence. She had learned the strength of choosing her own family, cultivating relationships based on care, respect, and mutual support. She saw clearly now that family was not about obligation or social expectation. It was about choosing people who honored and valued you for who you are. Lydia also noticed the ripple effect of her choices on everyday life. She approached social situations with a new clarity, assessing interactions and setting boundaries without hesitation. The lessons from that birthday party extended beyond family events. They became principles she applied to friendships, professional relationships, and parenting decisions. She had learned that standing firm in one's values, protecting one's child, and taking decisive action in the face of cruelty could transform an environment from one of tension and manipulation into a space of empowerment and calm. The story of the limited guest party became a quiet legend in the extended family. Those who had been present likely debated the actions Lydia had taken. Some may have labeled her vindictive, while others, she hoped, recognized the clarity and justice of her response. Regardless, the event served as a turning point, a clear demarcation between a past dominated by manipulation and a future defined by intentional choices and self-respect. Lydia understood that she had redefined the narrative, not through confrontation or anger, but through thoughtful, deliberate action that protected her daughter and reclaimed their dignity. As time passed, Lydia found herself reflecting often on the lessons of that day. She had learned that sometimes the most powerful actions are quiet, precise, and purposeful. You don't always need to argue, to storm out, or to create drama. Sometimes the most effective response is to act strategically, with calm authority, and to prioritize what truly matters. In doing so, Lydia realized that she had not only protected her daughter, but also reclaimed her own agency, transforming a moment of calculated cruelty into an enduring lesson in empowerment. By the time her father's 71st birthday rolled around, Lydia had fully embraced this new understanding. There was no large party, no tent, no caterers, no complex logistics. Instead, he asked her to plan a small, intimate dinner with only the people who truly mattered: Lydia, Lily, himself, and a few close friends. The atmosphere was relaxed, warm, and full of genuine connection. Simple meals, shared stories, laughter unburdened by hierarchy or expectation, and the presence of those who valued each other created a space that was profoundly satisfying. Lydia realized that family, in its truest sense, was measured not by the number of attendees or the grandeur of a celebration, but by respect, love, and inclusion. Watching her father blow out the single candle on a small birthday cake, with Lily on one side and herself on the other, Lydia felt a deep sense of completion and understanding. Her definition of family had changed irrevocably. It wasn't about bloodlines, social standing, or adherence to expectations. It was about care, kindness, and the people who consistently showed up in meaningful ways. She no longer sought validation from those who had proven themselves incapable of generosity or compassion. She had learned the value of drawing lines, choosing her own guest list in life, and surrounding herself and her daughter with authenticity and warmth. Lydia's story became a personal testament to the power of setting boundaries, reclaiming agency, and creating a life defined by self-respect and intentional choices. She took away the understanding that protecting her child, prioritizing meaningful relationships, and refusing to participate in toxic dynamics were not acts of vindictiveness, but of strength and wisdom. In doing so, she and Lily were free to build a life of joy, stability, and love, unshackled by the expectations or cruelty of those who had once sought to define their worth. And in that quiet, intentional space, Lydia discovered that the most empowering decision one can make is to choose who belongs in their life, who shares their joy, and who shapes their narrative. And on that list, she knew she and her daughter would never be limited again. So, what a journey, right? This story really reminds us how powerful it can be to set boundaries and choose the people we let into our lives. Protecting yourself and those you love isn't selfish, it's necessary. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where have you drawn boundaries? Or how do you handle tricky family dynamics? Drop a comment, and if you enjoyed the story, consider liking or subscribing for more stories like this. Your insights might help someone else too.